Hey all, welcome to another episode of Triumph with Reverend Dr. Senior Barnes, also known as RDB Speaks. And today I'm going to be bringing to the stage one of my co-authors of Triumph in the Trenches, Volume 1 and 2, and soon to be Volume 3. Dr. Mary D. Robinson is a dedicated director, licensed therapist, speaker, trainer, and consultant with over 20 years experience in the mental health and substance abuse services in Hampton Road, Virginia. In her doctoral role, she oversees program development and implementation, ensuring that services effectively promote overall wellness. Dr. Darden-Robinson brings a comprehensive approach to behavioral health, combining clinical expertise with organizational leadership to create meaningful change in the communities she serves. So without further ado, I will be bringing to the stage my co-author of the anthology Triumph in the Trenches, Dr. Mary D. Robinson. Hey, love, thank you so much for joining us today. Give us a little bit about where you are right now. What's going on with you? What's going on with you, Dr. Robinson?
So, thank you for the opportunity. I am presently still working in mental health and substance use, and I am actually a director of a program for outpatient substance use services in Virginia Beach.
Okay. And I have to let them know, right? So I just had the opportunity of meeting and hanging out with you in person over this weekend, which was so amazing.
It
This
was.
beautiful person. I mean, she is just a bundle of joy. So if you're in Virginia, follow her on social media. Even if you're not, and we're gonna put her hashtag and her IP address and everything in the comments later. But I want us to dig into Triumph in the Trenches. I want us to dig into where you are, what made you write your chapter, and you could just give me a little bit more about that. So the first question I have for you, Dr. Mary, is your chapters opens with the profound loss of your father at the age of 8, transforming you from happy and charismatic little girl into a confused child searching for belonging. How did that early experience of grief shape the woman you have become and the work that you do today as a therapist?
Well, it has definitely shaped how I authentically show up.
Mm.
It is was a very early reminder of just how precious life is, and that we absolutely have to live in the moment. That's why I'm incredibly excited. I had the opportunity to meet you as well, and to make sure that we value every relationship as well as spend time to not only establish the relationship, but to water it and watch it grow. And because in an instant, life can be completely different than what you know. And so the that loss was particularly difficult for me to manage. I was young, I was a daddy's girl, and so it was all about whatever daddy said. And
Mm-hmm.
so when I did lose my father, there was a part of me that I lost as well. However, in that, I found this strong sense of resilience just to bounce back, to always, be able to reinvent myself. Just because, with life, you're going to have your positives, your highs, your
Mm-hmm.
lows, and everything in between. And you have to embrace all of that. And so the ability to be able to bounce back is incredibly important. And that's also a skill that I work on very deeply with my clients, and anyone that I work with in general, or anyone really that I come into contact with. It's all about resilience. And the another part of that that's so important is I think that we spend a lot of time, especially after COVID, talking about the negatives and the difficulties and the challenges, and how life can definitely be in that space of come with a lot of difficult things, but there's also power in that resilience. You can't talk about the bad without talking about the good. So it definitely fired that sense of resilience. And also, my father was really big on education. And
Mm-hmm.
so that added an additional notch under my belt. I definitely wanted to make sure that I made him proud, and obtaining a doctoral was on my bucket list in order to honor my father's legacy.
Oh, I love that. And you said a couple of things that just resonate with me and my path as well. I was a daddy's girl as myself, um, and so I can definitely relate to that. And even though I was a bit older when I lost my dad, I still remember those moments and the things that he ingrained in me about, don't let anyone curb your tongue, speak your voice, make sure you advocate for yourself. And that I feel like that sense of resilience was instilled in me just because of my relationship and the things that I remember as well from him. So I can definitely relate to that. You also share a powerful moment in your chapter when your public speaking class, where your professor kind of dismissed everything you said because he was distracted by the color of your nails. You wrote something about how you felt judged and you felt like that was a part that curbed you and with your thought of how people judge you and how that mattered. How did that move you from a code switching and conforming to embracing your authentic self, even in the professional spaces that resist it now?
Well, I guess the reason that that moment was so profound is prior to that, I've always been a little bit, I'm gonna call it what it is, a little bit eclectic, different,
Okay.
like I said, resilient, and definitely alternative. So if it's busy, I'm doing it all at the same time. I don't care if it matches, I don't care if it works. And growing up in that fashion comes with, of course, some challenges. But when you're younger, I think people give you more grace than when they see you as budding into an adult. And so one of the reasons that situation was so pivotal is because here I am. I was probably about, I'm going to say 19, maybe at that point, 20. And public speaking was a course that I had seen this teacher. So let me give you the front drop before all that. I saw this particular professor and she was captivating. And I was like, oh my goodness, I have to take her class. Public speaking is not my thing, but she had me under this spell and I saw her, speak. And
Mm-hmm.
so when I went into her course, I was like, okay, well, I'm here now. This is going to be awesome. And the project was create a recipe and then speak about it. So I
Mm-hmm.
showed up that day in my authentic self. At that point, would have been natural hair and definitely fingernails would have been on fleek and busy. And I probably had on a bunch of stuff that didn't match. And I showed up authentically as myself. And I had prepared for a good period of time. I also had, I was pretty nervous speaking in front of people at that point. And so I go to do my presentation and the professor just told me in front of everyone, okay, so I didn't hear anything you said because those nails were so busy. Immediately I realized that being in that space to be eclectic as a young adult was going to come with some other barriers and some other challenges that I didn't foresee prior to. So
Mm-hmm.
before you're really considered an adult about to graduate from college and that kind of thing, you can kind of get away with most things. But there's, I think, this level or this time where people expect you to come into this full mature professional person. And that person, I've come to find out, on paper looks very different than how I look.
Mm-hmm.
Black suit, blue suit, heels, black or brown hair, maybe blonde, but definitely not your whole head blonde.
Mm-hmm.
French manicure, all those things. And so, what I realized at that point, it was very defining for me whether or not I was going to continue to allow people to tell me what professionalism looked like, or if I was going to embrace where I was in the space that I was in and to show people that, you can be professional and be alternative. And that was the path that I took.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. As someone who has navigated those spaces myself, I've always been a little different myself, never were kind of one to follow the trend. And so I can relate to going on job interviews. And before I get ready to go on a job interview, my mother just saying, like, oh, you're going to wear that or you're going to wear your hair like that. And it's like,
Yes. Yep.
um, I was feeling really comfortable until you said something. Yeah, I was, but
Right.
now what? But that was something that we recognize, or after she explained to me, is that people will always interview you based on how they perceive you when they first meet you, and they won't even give you a chance to really answer the interview questions. You can be the most qualified, but because of their own thinking and their perceptions and the way they navigate the world, that's what they're going to be looking at. And that was a hard pill to swallow, so I can
Mhm.
definitely relate. And I think that's something that we continue to face even now. So it's so important that you share your chapter and things like this, because you have so many young women and young men that's coming up behind us who are still going to experience that. So it's great that you shared that in the chapter as well. You brought something else that was really eye-catching to me, and I wanted you to talk more about the placeholder and the placeholder phenomenon. What does that mean? What exactly is that? And kind of walk us through your experience of how you felt, like when you realized you were being used to fulfill a quota rather than value for your contributions, when you bring so much to the table already.
Well, it definitely goes back to the question that you just asked, to go back for just a second to the code switching. Following
Mm,
up kind of what you said, of course, my mother would always talk to me about presentation, how you show up, how people are going to receive you. And so at one point, before I really had embraced it, I remember when I went natural. And so to go on an interview, I would grab my wig. I had a bob, and the bob would come on. The nails usually went down. I didn't have anything on them until usually I got comfortable, and then I came out. And so
mhm,
it's interesting to be having this conversation now. But as a result of that, it made me definitely gravitate to myself and to be able to find, a sense of power and strength. And
mhm,
so the idea of the placeholder came from the experience where I would get, a seat at the table. So let's say there's this opportunity, we'll say, and there's a position that's going to allow me to go beyond where I am. So at that point in my life, I was looking for more roles that were supervisory director. I had done already a good period of direct care and hands-on delivery, which I'm excellent at. But I wanted to go beyond that. And so positions would come up available. And because I met the criteria on paper, I would get an interview. But at the interview, I could already tell
mm,
that there was probably somebody else that was next in line and that was
mhm,
waiting on that position. And so I was utilized as the placeholder. So they were able to make the power move to bring the person that worked there into that position. A real life example of this. I think this is the most difficult experience that I had. Is I went on an interview. I had been hired to consult with a particular organization. It was a pretty large organization. And as I'm consulting, they have this director role that's available. So I'm like, oh, this is great. I already am consulting with them. Um, this might be an awesome opportunity for us to be able to forge a relationship. And so I go in for the interview panel. So of course I'm going to say about 4 or 5 people that are interviewing me.
mhm,
Um, and so not a very diverse panel, to be honest and transparent. And so at the end of my interview, after I've shared all of my strengths, areas that I'm continuing to develop, I find out shortly thereafter that the interview panelists, the folks that were interviewing me, had actually been selected for that role. So he
mm,
sat on my interview. He heard all of my positives, all of my areas of opportunity, all of my strengths, all of my insights, and then was able to utilize that for his own interview to be able to
mm,
secure the actual position. So it was clear that I was being used in a sense to be able to make the next step, because as you know, in most places in organizations, you have to have so many people to interview, but they have to be legit folks that meet the criteria. And
mhm,
so that was one of the very first times that I sat and thought about it. However, it's happened to me so much that I've decided that there are some folks I won't interview with anymore, because I've interviewed with you 3 or 4 times. I'm not the best interviewer, to be honest. I get a little bit nervous, but out of 3 or 4 times, you got the best of me. So
right.
if you're not hiring me, then I know that there's something else up. So there are some folks that are on my list of, and I've decided I won't be interviewing with them any longer, because it's always someone within, but they'll use me for the interview to make that move.
Mhm. And thank you for sharing that. That just brings me back to when I used to sit on the leadership team and we had to do interviews. And the one thing that I've always voiced and felt uncomfortable with was the create a project, come share your project. Especially when we knew that we already had someone in mind, but sitting through that for formality or just having someone do that and then turning on later and saying, well, hey, we think that you should do it this way because we already collected information from other people. So that always rubbed me the wrong way. So I can definitely see both sides of it. And then it's just something that happens to us often. Women of color going on these interviews, sitting in as a placeholder when the people already know that they have someone they want
Mhm.
to pick. And then it's almost like having you go through this whole dog and pony show,
It
where it's
is.
like, I need you to put on this. I need you to put on the theatrics for me, right? If you would say,
It is.
and like you said, all right, I've interviewed 3 times for this same position already. I don't know how much more you want me to say without basically just doing the job for a week or so without pay, because that's basically what I feel like the third or fourth interview. At this point, I work here. I know what
Absolutely.
I know where to go get the water where the water cooler is. I know where the coffee maker is. Like, I know where the microwave is. At this point, you're gonna send me to the lounge how many times? So at this point, I'm pretty much just working here for a week or two for free until you I'm your sub until you put in the person that you want. So I definitely um
Absolutely. I
can
could have
relate
sat
to that.
myself in the conference room and they could have came in whenever they want and I would have been ready because I knew where everything was because I've been there so many times. But I will say that a sense of empowerment came when I realized it, right? So if I think about just my, my progression and my growth, the doctoral thing was something that was to honor my father, right?
Mhm,
So I thought when I got that people would, kind of like I would move from this place of only being seen as a therapist to being seen as a therapist that has all these other talents. I can do
mhm,
project management. I can, create a program. I can do all of these things. And what I found is people continue to put me back into she's a therapist. Now, there's nothing wrong with being a therapist. Nothing at all. I'm a therapist through and through. However, there's something to be said to do the bait and switch. So the bait and switch I also mentioned in my chapters to tell me I'm
yeah,
coming for a director role when in fact I'm coming for a direct care role. That is what I really wish that organizations would take a look at. Um, because to call it something different than what it is really not fair to that candidate.
mhm,
And if you need to see whether or not I'm a good clinician because I'm, supervising a clinical team, then most of my experience is that. So I'm sure you'll be able to get whether or not I'm clinically sound through some of the other folks and through just the information that you can find about me. And so I've had the beta switch where it's we want you to be a director, come, tell us what we can do for our program. And then tomorrow I'm providing direct care services so that you can get the coins. Now, just be honest about it. That's not what you told me it was. It's one thing when I know, it's something different when I don't.
exactly. And I feel like many people have that experience when they're going in, especially when you have, it's almost like when you're transitioning from one role to another after you've already been, you received all your accolades and degrees and all those things.
Mhm.
It's like now you're in a position where you can say, like, hey, I know what I'm willing to stand for and what I'm not willing to stand for. Don't play in my face, please. Like,
Absolutely.
like go, and you can't say that in a meeting, but in your head, you just like, are these people really gonna play in my face? Like, don't
Hmm.
play in my face. You see it on paper, you see my credentials, you know what I bring. So tell me exactly what it is that make sure that what I'm applying for is matching the duties that you want for me. And that kind of takes us into the whole mention that you mentioned, what you mentioned about being a mascot, and those barriers of what you faced in there. And so, like, I wanted to talk a little bit about how did that feel to be displayed rather than developed, because that's something that happens often as well. We come
Hmm.
in with all our knowledge, all our brilliance, all our background that we bring, and it's more of like we hired you just to say that we have someone in this standing, but we don't really want you to do that. We
Hmm.
have this other thing we want you to do. And so it's like, what was that like for you in that sense? And how did you navigate the tension between self-expression and career advancement when you're working with someone who's not really trying to develop you?
That's a really good question. I spent some time most recently thinking about that because every supervisor has a commitment to develop you in some sort of way or fashion, or you really shouldn't call yourself a supervisor, to be quite honest. It has now happened to me so many times that for a good period of time, like before, writing Triumph in the Trenches, the chapter that I wrote, I had these experiences, but it was like, okay, common denominator. If I go back to math, like, am I the common denominator? How does this just keep happening? Maybe it's me. Maybe I'm
Mhm.
experiencing something that's not really happening, right? Because those pieces of the microaggressions and the gaslighting, those things really do a job and a number on folks' mental health and ability to navigate. And you start to completely second guess anything that you think, especially if it's something positive in that space. And so when I realized that it was happening, um, at first, there's a part of you that's like, okay, well, this is good. Because at least I show other folks that you can show up authentically and
Mhm.
you can, get a position in a director's role, or you can be a program administrator, or you can, supervise several programs like I had in the past. Um, so at first I saw it as well. There's still an awareness there because I still can kind of like go through the side door, the window, the
Mhm.
back door if I have to. If I can just show up, then I can speak out of turn or do whatever I need to do to make it worthwhile. And then there's another side of that, after getting past that thought was, that I was being used, like you said, just to show up, don't talk.
Mhm.
And we want everybody to think that we are really inclusive and that we're a safer workspace. I
Mhm.
don't say safe because safe is very different for different folks, and things that I may find safe, you may not, and vice versa. You
Mhm.
may say, hey, that's safe. And I may say, absolutely, no, it's not, and not be open to it. Um, and so what the other part of that was thinking, what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue to be resilient. I'm going to continue to show up. I'm going to continue to be authentic, but I'm not just going to show up and do, what I'm told to do. So I'm going to look for an opportunity to be able to still speak. That was my
Mhm.
major piece first. And then the second piece was, I don't want to be in that role to just show up, even if I'm going to speak out of turn. But that
Mhm.
came with maturity. I realized that there's another part of that. So one of the things that was difficult for me was bringing folks on that may look more like me,
Mhm.
into a space that I know wasn't safe for myself.
Got it.
And I struggled with that because then I realized what's on the other side of that. So I would get hired into these positions and these roles, and I would show up, and my main thing would be, okay, I'm going to make sure that we have a more diverse, safer environment.
Mhm.
And on the other side of that, it's just like when you hire that person as that diversity hire, you think you're doing a good thing. That really plays on their mind as well. Because as the diversity hire, I'm responsible for what everyone sees someone like this to show up for. That is a lot. That's a lot to carry. And then the other part is understanding that folks have feelings and emotions.
Mhm.
And so I had to also learn to be able to have the uncomfortable conversation and let folks know that what they were experiencing was real if they ran into some of the things I was running into.
I love that. I always say that it's important to one, as a human, you want to have emotional intelligence, but especially as a leader, you want to have
Mhm.
emotional intelligence because you want to make sure that you're leading from a space where you are bringing someone up, you're pouring into someone because you want to develop them because they're only as great as you're only as great as the person that you're supposed to be, that's shadowing you, right? Or the person
Very
that
true.
you're leading. The goal is for you to be a shepherd. Leadership is a title. Like leadership is a skill. People take it on as a title, but leadership is actually a learned skill. It's something that you learn. You learn these tools, these strategies, these techniques, and then you transfer them on to others. And that's how you build your team. But when you're so busy just focused on I'm a leader, I'm in a
Mhm.
leadership position, it's like, but who are you leading? Who are you
Mhm.
leading if you're not developing those that you're responsible for in that group? Who are you leading? What is your real purpose in your role? And so I'm so happy that you shared that because that is so key. I always tell when I'm coaching, I tell people I want you to think about when you're having a discussion with someone, are you being a mirror or are you being a window? Are you being a mirror, meaning like you are being mindful that the words that you're sharing are landing on to another person and they have their own thoughts, feelings, and emotions and they have to process it too? Or are you just a window where you just like, I'm speaking into the universe and this is what, and whatever happens, happens.
Mhm.
Like, so you have to be mindful of what you're putting out there because it's not a monologue. They're gonna have a response, and
Oh, absolutely.
it may not be what you're expecting or what you practice it to be. So you have to
Mhm.
be ready for that, and you have to be emotional intelligent enough to know how to read a room, read emotion, read those social cues, read the person's body language, so that you can navigate appropriately. So I'm so happy you shared that.
And
What?
even not to cut you off, Reverend Dr. Zinnia, but also to have the awkward conversation. So I'm
Exactly,
an awkward
exactly.
person anyway. So I will have 100 awkward conversations with you. We're gonna have this conversation though, because I think too many times people shy away from it, and there can be growth on both sides from having the awkward conversation.
That is so true. And also knowing when, okay, I know that this conversation is going to be awkward. Let me make sure I prepare myself. Let me make sure I
Yes.
prepare myself and make sure I make those notes and those cues for myself so when I know, like, you know what, this is not going the way
Hmm.
it should go. We're gonna pause this. Let's pause
Yes.
this and come back to it. And so often what happens is that people want to get their point across to the point where they don't recognize when they need to pause and
Yes.
come back. And as a leader, you can't just lead with a jackhammer and like I'm going to drill this and I'm going to keep going until my
Hmm.
point comes. But if the person is already checked out, then no one wins. And if you're already gone and checked out off and running off of just your emotions, then you're not going to get your point across and nothing's going to be resolved. So that's so important. I also want you to think, I want to think about some tips that you can give those who are coming into the workforce and they're just trying to figure out, like, what advice you would give someone who's trying to discern whether or not they should work with the organization, like if this organization is worth their time or their talents during the interview process, because that's something we often face.
Well, and that's a really good question. In the space of, so I have an advocate that I've worked with that's helped me navigate some of these very challenging situations and experiences in employment. And the best of one of the things she's given me a lot of great advice, but one of the best pieces of advice that she gave me was to ask questions.
Okay.
Now, I ask questions at the end of the interview because I know that's one of the things that, brings them into you. They want to know, do you care? Do you have questions?
Mhm.
Did you research us? All those things. But one of the questions that became a part of what I ask at the end when they give me the time to ask them, because the other piece is folks don't realize that you may be interviewing me, but I'm interviewing you too.
There you go.
And you don't know what experience I've had. Even if you Google somebody, you're not supposed to do that, but I know folks do it before you show up, right? You do not know what kind of things I have in my invisible backpack, my invisible 18, 16 wheeler truck, U-Haul, whatever I got back there, you don't know. And so it's coming from a space of making sure that we come from a trauma informed space. How do you
Mhm.
do that? You do that by just assuming universal trauma. So I'm just going to assume that you've had some sort of trauma, so I'm going to interact with you differently. Um, and one of the ways, excuse me, that I get information about whether or not it's going to be a safer situation for me is by asking a question. And it goes a little something like this. So one of the things I'll ask is, can you tell me a little bit about how you all display that you really value diversity? What I'm looking for is I'm looking for, representation. And if whether or not someone speaks, their voice is going to be heard or
Mhm.
ignored or dismissed. So that's one thing. Adding a question or two to the end of what you're asking, when you have an interview pertaining to diversity and inclusion is important. The
Mhm.
other piece is being aware. Know that if you see one or two or three things that you feel may tell you that something's not quite right in the space that you're going to be interviewing at. So usually when you show up and you're meeting with the people, you can kind of get a vibe for either it's going to be okay or absolutely not based on some of the questions. Sometimes it's from that first phone call when they call you for the interview. Were you
Mhm,
professional? Were you personable? Did you try to interview me the next day? I mean, that looks thirsty, right?
mhm.
Or are you looking to interview me like you would give me time to give a request leave and things like that? So you got to pay attention, because
Okay.
the way that you go into the relationship with a potential employer is going to tell you how they navigate things. And so
Mhm,
they're going to give you little tidbits throughout the process, down to at the end, if they give you an opportunity to ask questions. Some folks will interview you, you come in and they're like, okay, that's the end. They'll dismiss you and that's the end of that, right?
mhm,
Is that because there's something else going on there? Like there's a placeholder situation? Do the folks not look like they're paying attention to anything you're saying? They're just, looking like they nodding off at your interview, asleep or whatever. Like you have to pay attention to the different things that you're seeing. So I would say first, ask questions. Second, pay attention. Third, find a network of folks that can support you in the space of navigating challenging diversity desert workspace. Okay.
mhm,
So if you come into a space that is not supportive of inclusion, and I can say this on your podcast, I'm sure, or supporting the idea of representation or even
mhm.
allyship, right? That doesn't mean that I can't relate to anyone that doesn't show up authentically looking like me, right? We also do need allies to be able to take the conversation further. But if you don't get the feel that that space is safer for you, I'm going to tell you, trust your instinct.
Okay.
Find a community and definitely lean into your community as you navigate these difficult experiences. So, in summary, really what's important to do is to ask the questions, right, pertaining to inclusion, representation, and diversity. That also lets them know that that's something that's important to you, that's a theme. And that also will challenge that organization in a positive, healthy way to kind of consider, how they think about diversity and inclusion, even though I know those are curse words for some folks, it really shouldn't be. Um,
Mhm,
the second thing I would say definitely is to pay attention and be attentive to what you're seeing and hearing when it comes to this, the particular organization that you're interviewing with. And then make sure that you find a community in an environment where you can kind of be authentically yourself and receive
mhm,
support and know that your voice is valuable and that folks want to hear what you have to say. Find a way to use your voice, whether it's through journaling, whether it's through writing. I mean, we came together. I'm so thankful for our paths having crossed, because I don't know that it would have in any other way. And it has been
mhm.
a great experience through Triumph getting to know you, Reverend Dr. Zinnia, and just being a part of this anthology and this experience has been incredibly dope.
Mhm. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I likewise, the feeling is definitely mutual. And so it's so important to mention those things, because another question to even to piggyback on what you said and to add on that, I often tell individuals when they're going in these interviews and they have that space to ask questions, ask about their turnover.
Yes.
Ask them about like how high is their turnover rate, overrate. What do they actually do to prevent turnover? What strategies or what plans, policies do they have in place to prevent their employees from
Hmm.
becoming burnt out? Those are some questions that you want to ask for yourself, but also to let them know these are things that you're going to be looking for. So, like you said in the beginning, yes, they're interviewing you, but you're also interviewing them, and you want to
Absolutely.
know: do they have a plan? What is like? What's their policy? What are their mental health days look like for staff? Do they have that? Do they have some type
Hmm.
of policy that supports someone who's going through something, who has an invisible disability? Like, what does that look like? You want to know those
Absolutely.
things so that you're properly prepared, because we know that life can change in
Hmm.
a second, and you want to be ready for that. Um, and then I
And the
want you
other question you can
to.
ask them too, not to cut you off, that I asked that throws people all the way off. Can you tell me a little bit about or explain why you all are looking for a candidate for this role? The last person that was here, what happened? And they're usually like, no, she didn't. And I'm like, I'm here for it. Yeah. So why are you looking for somebody to fill this position? And so
And
it's
we
a
want to see
good
what that looks like,
sign.
right?
Right. It's a good sign when they're like, I've had one place say, well, they were able to move up and now we're looking to fill this role because it's now vacant as a result. I can dig that. But if you
Hmm.
don't ask, you don't know. It may be that the other person decided that in this role, they had had enough. And it
Mm-hmm.
was either them, their mental health, and their ability to be able to function for the folks that love and support and care about them, or it was, to stay and to continue to be mistreated.
Hmm. And you can tell by the answers whether they're being honest or whether they're like
Yep.
just trying to figure out how to answer that question in the moment. And usually, when the person has transitioned for like a better position and or
Hmm.
just life choices, then the answer is just is natural and it easily flows. But when there's some back end story or misuse, burnout, or things like that, you'll tend to see them fumble. So
Yep.
those are just some key things to keep in mind. After 20 years of working with underserved populations and navigating these professional trenches yourself, how do you help your clients, especially Black professionals, navigate their own workplace trauma?
So the first thing that I'm going to say is recognizing, as Mr. Phillip would say, recognizing whether or not you should stay or go. Right? Do you stay or do you go? Now, Mr. Phillip, who's one of our co-authors, he goes about going a different kind of way, but
Mhm.
which I appreciate, because I definitely would love to have some Mr. Phillip, one of them easy buttons when people say stuff and just press it and it be a Mr. Phillip voice. But you have to decide what you're going to do. As I talked
Mhm.
about earlier, at first my goal was to hire and make sure that there was a diverse amount of folks at a workspace. And then after having some experiences myself, I realized that wasn't enough. And then it
Mhm.
switched to, how do I take care of the people, that come here seeing me, thinking that this is an authentic space, you can be yourself and it's okay. So I would say also, once you decide whether or not to stay or go, accept that role. I think I really struggled at one point in that space because as an African American woman, I was always raised to know that there was no, I don't know how to say it, but punk down. You gonna take this, you gonna go. Ain't no running, ain't no turning around and walking away. And it always set me up for this. And I know my family didn't mean it to be this, but this superwoman mentality that you
Mhm.
just keep going, 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 going. But at what cost is what I recently found out. So I keep pushing and going at what cost. I'm gonna lose myself. And that's not something that you want to do. So understanding it's okay to take that cape off, right?
Mhm.
And it's okay to seek help. I also grew up in a space where, I was always told what happens in my house stays in my house.
Mhm.
I know that some other, within my culture, I know there are other folks that heard that same messaging, but understanding that also kept a lot of people sick. There is nothing wrong with getting you a little bit of therapy.
Not at all.
Nope, I'm one of those folks. And I will say, I have been to therapy. And at one point, I had a very good therapist that said to me, coping skills only takes you but so far.
Mhm.
We're beyond that. You have to make a decision to stay or go.
Mhm.
Because I was saying, well, I must have failed. Because how is it I teach coping skills all day? How is it that my coping skills aren't working? I'm not doing what I need to do. And he had to say to me, Dr. Mary, like, that's temporary.
Mhm.
That's not long term. So I'm
Mhm.
going to say, get some help and preserve yourself and rest.
Mhm.
You will be no good for anybody else if you don't do that. The other thing I will say is create your own narrative. So when I've transitioned, folks have all kinds of narrative they create. You create whatever you want to create, but you and I know the truth. And be okay with that and stand in that space firm,
Mhm.
feeling proud of yourself that you did what you could in that experience.
I love that, and understand that it's okay that you had to walk away. For we have had it ingrained in us for so long that you don't walk away or you can't just give up. But at some point, like you said, at some point you have to put yourself first. You have to put your mental wellness first. You have to put your peace first. You have to take care of home. And when I say home, I
Yep.
mean your entire body, mentally, spiritually, physically, everything. And you can't do that if you stay on empty. So thank you so much for sharing that. This has been a phenomenal interview. I'm so happy. But before I let you go, there's a few things we need to clean house with. One, I have to ask you, what does it mean to be a trauma blocker to you? Because I'm the official trauma blocker. And I see your t-shirt. I love the t-shirt. Yes. So what does it mean to be a trauma blocker to you?
To me, being a trauma blocker means that you have experienced trauma, but you're not going to allow that trauma, even though it's going to, it may be something residual that comes up in different ways and different forms. You're not going to allow it to hijack your future.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what being a trauma blocker means to me. Yes, I may have this trauma, this, 18-wheeler truck behind me, this U-Haul, this invisible book bag, but it doesn't stop me. If
Mm-hmm.
anything, it's going to catapult me to continue to go further because the win is still there. The resilience is ingrained in you. You have it. And so that trauma, you better block that trauma, girl, and get on up out of there. Get up out of your head, get out there and live life and be resilient.
Thank you so much. I love it. I love your definition and your rendition of what it means to you, because no one can tell your story like you, and
That
no
is
one
true.
has lived in your trauma the way you have lived in your trauma. So take those lessons or the things that you learned along the way and say, you know what? I'm gonna block this. I'm not taking this into my new chapter. And so
Yeah.
that's what being a trauma blocker is about. It's about you having the skill set and you having the willingness to say, I'm going to step one foot in front of the other, and I am not willing to bring this trauma, this trauma with me. Thank you all for tuning in. Yes, she is my co-author, Dr. Mary. She's a co-author, one of the co-authors of the anthology Triumph in the Trenches, Volume 1 and 2, and now we have Volume 3 coming up. And
Yes,
what
we
is our
do.
release date again? Our release date is
February. I believe it's
yes, it
February
is. Yes, it
26th, if I'm not mistaken. But before we close this up, I want to tell
is.
you thank you. Thank you for allowing me to utilize your platform to share my thoughts and my insights and to be authentically and show up authentically and to receive me in the way that you have. It's been a great experience, and I look forward to many more things, many more opportunities for us to connect and continue to build a trauma informed, community where folks
Yeah.
can learn to block that trauma, and keep it moving.
Absolutely. But tell the audience, tell them how they can get in contact with you. Where can they find you?
I'm on
We
social
trying to skate
media. So
out.
look, I tell people that I'm an introvert. Folks don't believe it, but I really am an introvert. But I spend time in the extrovert space. So I'd
Mhm,
like to say that I'm private, not private. You can find me
mhm.
on social media. I go by Doctor on TikTok, spelled out, and I go by Dr. Dr. Instagram. Also, my website is Creative Therapy Approaches and Consulting, and I love to do all things. Pertaining to program evaluation, consultation. And another thing that I do is I'm a gatekeeper. So I do help other folks to get licensed so
Mhm.
that, the folks that are coming behind are prepared to be able to take care of our community. There needs to be more therapists, there needs to be more representation. And I'm honored to be an African American therapist who also sets up other folks to be their own independent clinician and to know that it's okay to be authentic to them, how, whatever that looks like.
Oh, I love that. See, I told you I was bringing a gem on the stage, and I meant that. She is such a phenomenal queen, and I'm so
You
happy
are
to
as
have met
well.
her and share her with you all. So stay tuned. More to come. We have more books, more collaborations. We have more everything to come. So stay tuned. I'm going to be dropping her links in the bio. Please like, follow, and share on all social media platforms. Dr. Mary, the Dr. Mary, thank you so much for joining Triumph with Dr. Barnes today.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Barnes. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.